I'm an old guy, I brought you a book, my favorite book on programming. It's Clean Code from Bob Martin. And there's one sentence in it, a quote, which I want to take to start this session. Clean code always looks like it was written by somebody who cares. When I was a young, ambitious Salesforce developer, I cared a lot, knew nothing, made a lot of mistakes. And when I actually got a few colleagues, I thought, what can I do to control their code and teach them better? And then I became the guy who built PMD for Apex, or I didn't build it, I just ported it from Java to Salesforce. And then I often said, clean code also looks like it was written by somebody who had PMD to enforce it. I know you are all here because you know PMD, because you care about clean code. You probably heard about that PMD can do more. So maybe this question or this quote by a real person summarizes why you are here. I did many talks about PMD over the last years, and many Salesforce admins came to me, or people who do more than coding, and said, how does this work on a low-code platform where most of the stuff that we do is XML or not coding? So welcome to Customize PMD for any metadata within minutes. My name is Robert Sösemann. I'm a Salesforce MVP. And work as a principal architect for a Salesforce partner called Aquivalabs. We are one of those unknown partner types called PDO. We help companies into the App Exchange. We help them stay there, be innovative. So if you ever want to make money with building an app and don't want to do everything on your own, come to me, come to my colleague Anna. But this is not about us as a company. This is about PMD. Let me just get rid of that. This is the talk I'm also doing tomorrow, and it's 45 minutes long. So I say it's within minutes, but I needed some material to actually stretch the time to fit 40 minutes. So I decided to start with a high-level view on the topic in general, because maybe give a quick show of hands. How many people here are just starting with PMD? Heard about it from Sila's talk? Okay, cool. And how many people are already super bored because I said things they have heard in 1,000 other places? And okay, yeah. No, that was the wrong question. Who's using PMD extensively? Cool, perfect. Yeah, under the hood. Great. So I think this bird's eye view is good for all of you, because you need to understand how does PMD fit into this wider space in Salesforce. Does it actually make sense to invest in PMD, or is there something better around the corner? So the bigger picture, this is a slide which will just contain more and more. So this is where we all start. We write messy and risky code in our IDE, and before we get it to the customer or before we get it into the App Exchange, we want it to be clean and secure. And I use those two terms because Salesforce only cares about secure code. They want that we don't mess with the data and the limits of their customers. They don't care so much about clean code, but I care more about clean code because this is where I'm actually coming from. What's the difference? I would say when your code is not secure, you go out of business immediately, and if it's unclean, you will go out of business in 5 years because you cannot add cool stuff, you cannot refactor, nothing. Okay, so yeah, especially, so the problem was always around, especially when Salesforce introduced the App Exchange. They gave us a tool called checkmarks, a crappy tool to say. It didn't change since the last decade, but it was always a requirement. If you wanted code on the App Exchange, you had to test it with checkmarks. Yeah, and people are still somewhat suffering from it. That was a a chance for commercial players, and companies like Clayton, DigitSec, CodeScan, which is now AutoRabbit, came around and made better UI, better rules to check code. So those players were also there. This is developer tooling, so developers actually are used to not pay for stuff, and they also don't accept crappy stuff. So there was also, and you see the stuff I don't like is gray, and the stuff I like is colored. There was other tools. There was open source tooling all the time, especially PMD, but also tools for linting JavaScript and Lightning Web Components. And Salesforce was actively investing them in that. So ESLint LWC is from Salesforce. When I had my Dreamforce session in 2016 about PMD, Salesforce immediately had developers from their security team at Security Rules. So there was good stuff. But those guys, the dark guys here, they always bashed PMD. They always said it's not a good tool. You have too many false positives, and especially the security issues cannot be actually detected by PMD and all those other linters. Why is that? Those tools are made for being fast in your IDE. They look at the code of one class. That's why they're called static. And they detect issues and show you immediately that something is wrong. But for all the security problems where you like pass a string from one class to the other, you need actually a deeper understanding of the dynamic behavior. And this is what all those tools, or some of them, had from the very beginning. And also checkmarks. Checkmarks is a dynamic scanner. It actually understands how that goes. And then Salesforce made multiple smart moves. They first basically contacted me and the PMD contributors. Can we make PMD smarter, that it understands more? And it just didn't work out because PMD is not only for Salesforce. So they built something on their own. It's blue. It's from Salesforce. It's the graph engine. And this tool is able to do that. It can understand how code flows and how data flows in classes. But they did something even smarter. They gave it a wrapper architecture, the official Salesforce Code Analyzer or scanner. I don't know how they call it at the moment, but it's very lightweight. It's a SFTX plugin. You can run it from the command line, which means you can also run it from your CD/CI. And yeah, and this is really smart because it treats all those engines just like another engine. So all the issues that ESLint brings and PMD brings, they are basically harmonized. So it brings all those different open source tools. It makes them a really nice tool like those. So we're just going to talk about PMD, but PMD sits in the center of it. I would say in Salesforce, most of the things you do, Apex, triggers, metadata, only PMD takes care about them. This is not really fast and only covers a few rules, so this is really, at the moment, still the core of the code analyzer. So all of you, the people who invested in PMD or decide to invest more, they are actually in a very good spot. So Salesforce even made the code analyzer with PMD and the graph engine a requirement for the AppExchange security review. So I really go very quick over this. You know, PMD already comes with over 60 rules for security, for code styles, error prone. I will today not talk about them a lot, a little bit on how to parameterize them, configure them, but the important part is how to write your own custom rules. And this part is also very important. What do we do with custom object and fields, perm sets, flows, any org settings? I'm from an ISV background, so I care about apps, but people who are interested in DevOps, they are interested in totally different metadata forms and store them in their version control, and this is also for them very relevant. So We covered this and that, and now, before I switch into actual IDEs, I just want to show you what you need for that. You need two things. One is a boring XML file, because you don't need to become an open source contributor, you don't need to write Java, you just need your rule set XML. And a second thing, which not so many people know, which is very helpful, it's the PMD rule designer. It's an ugly Java UI, which helps you build your rules. Okay. Perfect. Oh, that slide is not for now. Okay, what's a rule set? I want to show you, the rule set is an XML file, and before I talk about what the content is, I want to tell you where you should have it. It's a first-class member in your version control. So this is the public repository, Unhappy Soup, where all the stuff that I do with PMD and show and share on Twitter lives, and there is a rule set XML file in the root of the repository, and this is what you should do everywhere. If you are on projects, you should do it. If you just put your whole org into version control, have your rule set there, check it in, take Robert's, and then evolve it over time. Just treat it as code. So when you go on this file and look at the history, you should see how your team actually evolved their own rules and things like that. Okay, let me go into my VS Code. So this is the same project. And now I will just basically spend most of the talk going through this boring XML file and tell you what is important. So let me just close that a little bit. Okay, so I will not talk too much about syntax. You know what XML is and how it looks like. You need to have a name. This name is like an API name. Call it our rule set. You can also give it a description. And then the next thing is quite important. You should make sure when you run PMD in your IDE, you are not checking all the libraries that you use. You know, when you use Andy Fawcett's fflib, make sure you don't check the code. Otherwise, you get a lot of issues that you actually don't want to care about. So there's ways to just say, really just look into force app main default, the path that Salesforce recommends for your own stuff. Maybe I just show you how I often have the structure. I have main, and then here I have another library, and this is just not checked. Okay. Then next, before you build your own rules, you have to configure the existing rules, those 60 which PMD brings, and they are all categorized. And for that, I just want to open my browser and look for PMD Apex rules. PMD has a wonderful documentation site, which is really like super helpful. And you see there is multiple categories. There are sometimes accidentally. I think they are not like super smart, but it's just the way it is. And in every category you have rules, and those rules have a wonderful description. And you should know them a little bit, because otherwise you cannot make such opinionated decisions as I do here. I, for example, say all the security rules, we just need them. So this means take all of them. And I make them priority 1. And this priority is just like it's a value. But most IDEs, when I go into a class like this one, or let me go into a really ugly one, like the Voldemort. When PMD scans them, you see there is different types of those squiggly lines, and the convention is that like really severe issues get those red lines, and warnings with a level 2 get those yellow lines, and there's also a blue line. But that's actually not super important, but it's important when you make your DevOps pipeline and you want to fail a PR if there's a severe issue. This is the moment where the priority of rules actually is quite important. Okay. The next one, the best practices category. Here you see I'm just excluding rules. And you see this is really my rule set, which I use in my projects, even partially in our company. I just think many PMD rules are stupid. You know, I didn't contribute them, other people contributed them, I couldn't say no, I just don't want them. For example, there's a rule which says every Apex unit test needs to have a run as. I mean, who does that? I don't do that. Yeah, so I just say I don't want it, no smart person does that. I like to rant a little bit in my documents. And yeah, so this is just excluding stuff. You see, I try to explain the story in steps. You can also parameterize or configure existing rules. And this is something which many people don't know. There is, for example, this rule which says Apex unit tests should have asserts. And now Salesforce brought out this new assert class, and PMD didn't work anymore, and they said, when will PMD actually bring that new rule? Or other people have their own assertion library. There's properties. I will show you here. This package PMD rule has a property which allows you to just specify with a regular expression other assert methods. And how do I know that? Very simple. I just take this name and look for this rule. And then you see there is a section with properties, and it's exactly described here. So not like other open source, PMD really has a ton of stuff. Okay. Next one. I'm also trying to give you some information about which rules I actually don't like. In the design category, there is a ton of rules. When I imported PMD, I basically took all the Java rules, which made sense, and handcrafted them to Apex. But many of them are super redundant. I mean, that's controversial. Some people think that we cannot exclude them all, but you know, there's a rule which tells you there's too many constructors, there's too many public methods, whatever. There is the one rule which I liked the most was cyclomatic complexity. It's a rule which basically tells you how deeply nested your code is and how messy it is. And then a wonderful company, Gearset, came along and implemented an even better rule called cognitive complexity. And that's the only rule which I basically leave in here, because that's a rule which tells you, wow, this code is way too complex. And this rule is so complicated that it needs to be implemented in Java. It's based on a paper from another, what's the company name? Sonar. I think they are very, very deep in this whole static analysis, and they just found that this is the best rule to find out if code is very complicated. Okay, what else do I want to show you? Okay, we're slowly moving over to customizing stuff. So in the performance category, there is a few rules which I kick out. There is avoid DML in loops, SOCL in loops, SOSL in loops. They are deprecated. There's a new rule, operation within limits. If there's any new limit or any new method which crashes in loops, we would put it in there. And now I'm switching over to how do I create my own rules. I want to talk about the avoid debug statement rule. Maybe I just show you code. You know, when you put something like that in your code, and your customer has like logging on their production system, it's slowing the system down and they are calling you. So PMD has a rule, where is it? Here, which warns about that. I can even no, I excluded it. It would warn me in all those cases, but I think when I code, I often leave stuff like that in the code, like logging level error. Nobody accidentally puts logging level error in his debug logs. So I want this to actually be accepted, and the PMD rule doesn't do that. So what I need to do is write my own rule. And I will immediately explain what I do. So first I exclude the PMD rule, and then I just create my own rule. I don't have to use the same name, I just do it. And for that, I hope you can read it very good. This is basically all you need to build a custom Apex rule. It's one code block with a rule. You give the rule an API-like name. You say it's for the language Apex, and then you give it a message, and the message is really the thing you see when you run, I don't know, your IDE or something. So then there is again this priority information, and then the actual interesting part starts here, and this is what you need to understand. And for this, you need the other tool, the PMD rule designer. So it's when you download PMD, the rule designer is already there. You just call it with a different parameter. So I went into my PMD folder. There is something, when you are on a Mac, you need to make something special with JavaFX, but this is something you can read up. But I'm just telling my terminal that I'm using JavaFX. And then I call PMD designer. And then this nice UI, I hope you can read it from the back because it's not like zoomable, it's Java Swing. Okay. There's multiple important parts here. PMD is not for Salesforce, so this works for all the languages which are supported in PMD. There's a language chooser. It's Apex at the moment. And this means in this window, I can actually put Apex code. So there's a foo class with a bar method, and here is the part you are interested in. There's something called abstract syntax tree that's from building parsers. It's a cryptic word, but it's basically a way how PMD breaks down your class when it looks at it. It doesn't see a class with 100 methods. It sees a tree of different nodes. And in the case of PMD, it sees an Apex file with a class with the name foo. It sees a message bar. It sees other methods which you do not even see here because it's constructors. So those CL init and clone and init are things which are always there, like a default constructor. And when you click on one of those nodes, like this method bar, you see a bunch of other attributes. You see like the version, the line in which the method begins. You see the return type and all of that things. And those are the ingredients which you need to actually build a custom rule. And the XPath statement is here. And I will just take this and put it in here to show you. So there is no system debug yet in here, but I put a system debug in here with a bunch of stuff. And then you see this expression here detects this node. And I know I sound a bit nerdy and 80s, but this is converted into an XML document. And this is XPath, an old language which was created to find nodes in XML. So this is basically an XPath statement which finds the problem that we have. So we are looking for a method called, so we want to detect this. You see, here's our system debug without a logging level. We say we want the full method name, which is one of the attributes in here, to be system debug. And we want this here to have at least 2 members. Or, yeah. And when you look at here, this is the case. It has this reference expression and a literal expression, so it detects that. The moment I put logging level error in here, it goes away, because now my method call expression just has 3 members. There's 100 ways to do that. I'm not like super proud of this, but it just works. It just works. And it worked in 1 line. Okay. I want to show you some more, which are quite fresh. So, according to this book, big comments on top of classes are often a sign of bad code. So I don't want those Java-like blocks. So I made a rule: comments are an excuse for bad code and bad tests. And I just said, okay, it's priority 3. We don't want to make a release fail, but we want to warn people in the IDE. And I just put this little formal comment in here, because that's the thing which you see in the abstract syntax tree the moment you put it in here. So I'm just creating one of those ugly, I know, now people hate me. So, yeah, right. Right. So where is it? Not sure why it doesn't show up, but it should show up. So formal.
Explain why it doesn't show up.
Yeah. Did I miss something? No matter. It works. It works. So this is a way to tell people that they shouldn't use commands. It doesn't work for the normal 1-line commands. That's a PMD itch, but yeah. Other rules. You know, maybe you have seen many people, especially younger developers, use this from Java everywhere. You know, they define something as a member variable, and then they always put this in front, and nobody can read stuff because everything starts with th. This is just a nice rule which tries to disallow that. And it's a little bit too complicated to go through all of that, but you can basically just I just showed you the repository where this is, and you can just take it, put it into the rule designer in here. I hope this time it works. This foo. Yeah, right. And it's not as simple. You know, there are some situations where you have like a variable here, like a private string bar. And then here you also have a string bar. And then you need something like that. This bar equals bar. So those are the situations where the use of this is okay, but this is not such a case. And you can actually encode that in such a rule. So yeah, I have a ton of stuff. Like, for example, I'm very nasty on this. I want, if a method returns something, call it just result, and the method name should actually say what it is and not. There is a ton of such things, but I want to switch to metadata XML rules. Because I showed you the tool which you need. Now you basically know everything. So let's start with something very simple. You all know when you have every class in Salesforce has this. And, and wouldn't it be nice if you get a warning that metadata should use the latest API version? Yes, it would be nice. So how do we do that? The good thing is this is just an XML file. So if I take that XML file, go back to my wonderful rule designer, switch the language to XML, I get this syntax error because now this is not valid anymore. I put the XML in here and I get a new abstract syntax tree. And yeah, here I can do the same, and I will just like try to do it. So you for example, you can always start with a root node, but I mean, we also want this to work for triggers, so we don't need to be very explicit about the whole tree. We can just say if there's an API version, and then I need to look how I did it. Don't know it. Yeah. There's also very neat like conversion functions, because this API version is actually a string, but to say something like this, it needs to be bigger than 50. We can first use the number function and convert the value. So, yes. This is a simple one. I want to show you a complicated one. I must explicitly say that flow is actually not very good for XPath rules, because flow has a structure which would actually require its own PMD language. Some people tried it, but then stopped doing it. But things like DML statement in flow loops, you can do it, and I just show you that. But, SOCL and DML in Apex loops is bad, but what about flows? I just brought you a flow which exactly has that. Here's like a loop. Then here's like in the loop a connector, and it references a thing called update contact. And when we scroll down, we see this update contact. Where is it? Search for it. Here. It's a record update. And PMD is able to detect that. That's also something many people don't know. It's not so simple that we just look for one node in an XML document. You saw it here. We actually look for this loop, but here in the loop there is no information if that's a DML. That's something which we only find out in the rule set statement. Let's just look at this. So, yeah, flow loops, target reference, text image. So we do the first part. We look for this loop, and then we say the name should not reference any of those. Record creates, deletes, updates, everything that represents like a DML. So, as teachers always say, you don't need to understand this. If this looks cryptic, you can all find this out on your own. I just want to show you what's possible within minutes. So I'm just scrolling over some other custom rules. Metadata requires a description. This is important for everybody who's just using PMD for DevOps. So like getting the whole org down into version control and versioning everything, then you also have perm sets and profiles and org settings in there. And this is a rule which says a permission set should not use view all and modify all. It's the same for system profiles. But you can even do system settings. So, for example, when your org should require that you use two-factor authentication, all of that is Salesforce metadata. All of that can be downloaded and just be scanned by PMD. Okay. Let me go back to my, no, that's the wrong one. That's the one branded for tomorrow. So, yeah, I have something for you before I close. Today you cannot do a talk without AI. So, you probably heard about the new GPTs that you can do on OpenAI, where you stuff your data in, give it instructions, and then let it impersonate yourself. And I thought I go on a sabbatical and just put everything I know about PMD, rule sets, and documentation, and so in there. And people were thrilled one weekend on LinkedIn and Twitter. So scan this code, and then you can try it on your own. So this is how it looks like. So you can basically chat with it, and you can ask it, help me with custom PMD rules. It might get the important part wrong, like the XPath. I never made it actually work, no matter how much information I put in there. But I mean, if you have ChatGPT Plus, try it out. Maybe you like it. Okay. Cool. Thank you. Everything I showed you, the code, classes with all those issues, the rule set is here in this rule set. You find the slides behind this QR code. Yeah, perfect. I hope I didn't take too much time, and if there's any question, I'm happy to take it. Rob.
So, because it's working with metadata, is it subject to the same limits that we are? I.e., if it's not exposed in the metadata API, try again with microphone.
It was better before.
Yeah. So the question is it subject to the limits of what Salesforce chooses to expose in the metadata API?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. But it's getting more and more. So
of course.
I never found things that I wanted to check in PMD which weren't exposed.
Yeah. Metadata coverage report is your friend.
Exactly.